Victoria Hayes tore the ID badge off. Nathan Carter's chest snapped the lanyard in her fist and threw it skidding across the polished floor of the executive lobby. "You're a janitor with a wrench," she said. "You don't touch a $10 million engine, ever." 40 people watched a single father pick his badge up off the ground without saying a word. What Victoria didn't know was that the engine she'd just defended, the one her whole company was built on, had Nathan's initials machined into the inside of the crankcase. 10 years ago, in his handwriting, she had just fired the man who built her empire. Before we start, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels tonight. And if you believe the quiet ones deserve better, subscribe. This one's going to hurt before it heals. 6 days earlier, at 4:40 in the morning, Nathan Carter was already in Bay 9 with his hands inside a gearbox that wasn't his job. That was the thing about Nathan. Nothing in that building was technically his job. He was listed on the payroll as Maintenance Technician 2 Facilities, which at Apex Velocity Racing meant he swept metal shavings, changed filters, hauled scrap, degreased floors, and fixed whatever the real engineers were too busy or too proud to fix themselves. He made $26 an hour. He had a locker with a picture taped inside the door, a 7-year-old girl with a gap where her front tooth used to be holding a paper trophy she'd made out of a cereal box. Danny Brooks came through the roll-up door with 2 coffees and found him elbow deep in the transmission. "Carter." "Morning, Danny." "That's a Tier 1 assembly. It was making a noise." "It's not making a noise now." "No," Nathan said. "It's not." Danny Brooks had been the workshop floor manager for 22 years. He was 61, had 2 bad knees, and 1 bad marriage behind him, and he had spent the last 3 years quietly noticing things about the maintenance guy that didn't add up. He set the coffee down on the fender. "You know what a Tier 1 assembly costs?" $94,000, Nathan said. $96 with the housing. Danny stared at the back of his head. "How does a floor tech know that?" Nathan wiped his hands on a rag and finally turned around. He had a face that looked older than 41, not from age, from something else. Weather, maybe. Or grief that had settled in and paid rent. "Invoices come through the recycling," he said. "I read while I work." "Uh-huh." "Coffee's cold, Danny." "It's 5 in the morning. Everything's cold." Danny picked up his cup. "Emma good." Something in Nathan's face opened up an inch. "She lost the other front tooth, Tuesday, bit into an apple and just..." He made a small motion with his fingers. "Cried for 10 minutes. Then asked if the tooth fairy did direct deposit." Danny laughed hard the way men laugh when they haven't got much else. 7 years old. 7. "Kid's gonna run the world. Kid's gonna do better than me," Nathan said, and he said it plainly, like reading a weather report, and went back under the car. Chaw. By 9 a.m., the building had changed temperature. Apex Velocity Racing had 2 floors and 2 species. Downstairs was concrete noise and men in coveralls. Upstairs was glass carpet and people who said things like brand equity. In 11 months of working there, Nathan had gone upstairs exactly twice, both times to unclog a drain. The Vanguard V10 lived in between in Clean Room 3 behind a magnetic door under lights so white they made everyone look sick. $10 million of engine. The single most expensive power plant Apex had ever built. 12 days from the endurance opener at Sebring, with a title sponsor whose logo was on every panel and a CEO whose face was on the cover of 2 business magazines that month. At 9:20 that morning on the dyno, it detonated a piston through the block. Nathan heard it from Bay 9. Everyone did. It sounded like someone dropped a safe from the roof. He set down his broom. He did not run toward it. That was the first mistake anyone in that building could have caught if anyone had been watching him, because every engineer in the place sprinted for the clean room, and the maintenance guy stood perfectly still in the middle of the floor with his eyes closed, listening to the echo, the way a doctor listens to a chest. Danny caught it. "Carter." Nathan opened his eyes. "What?" "You went white." "It's a lot of money," Nathan said, and picked the broom back up. Victoria Hayes arrived at the clean room 7 minutes later in heels she did not slow down in. She was 38. She had inherited Apex Velocity from her father 4 years earlier, a man who built engines with his hands and died with a lawyer in the room instead of a mechanic. And she had spent those 4 years proving to every board member and every trade journal in America that she was not a girl playing with her dad's toys. She'd cut costs 18%. She'd tripled sponsorship revenue. She had never once in 4 years been photographed with grease on her sleeve. "Talk," she said. Preston Vaughn was already talking. He was Chief Technical Officer 55 Silver at the Temples, and he had a voice built for exactly this, the confident delivery of information he did not have. Thermal event in Cylinder 6. We're looking at a fueling anomaly, possibly a sensor fault. We'll have it mapped by tonight. By tonight. By tonight. Preston. Victoria put one finger on the edge of the workbench. 12 days. I'm aware of the calendar, Victoria. Are you aware? Halverson Industrial is wiring the second sponsorship installment on the 14th. Are you aware that installment is $9 million, and it is contingent on that engine passing homologation? Vaughn's jaw worked. I built this program. Then fix this program. They did not fix it by that night. They did not fix it the next night either. By day 3, Clean Room 3 had 11 engineers in it, 4 laptops, a whiteboard covered in fluid dynamics scrawl, and a smell of burnt aluminum that wouldn't leave. They rebuilt Cylinder 6. It failed again on the dyno at 8,400 RPM. They changed the fuel map. It failed at 8,200. They pulled the whole top end apart and put it back together with 2 junior guys working 31 hours straight, and it failed at 8,600. And Marcus Reyes, 26 years old, first real job out of Purdue, sat down on the floor with his back against the tool chest and put his hands over his face. Nathan was mopping the corridor outside when Marcus came out. "Hey," Marcus said. "Sorry, did I track something?" "You're fine. I've been in there since Tuesday." "I know." Marcus stopped. He looked at the maintenance guy the way exhausted people look at anyone who isn't yelling at them. "Can I ask you something stupid? Those are the best kind. Do you ever get the feeling," Marcus said, "that a machine is trying to tell you something, and you just don't speak the language?" Nathan leaned on the mop handle. "What's it doing?" "What?" "The engine. What's it actually doing? Not what the data says. What's it doing?" Marcus blinked. It's fine to 8,000. Smooth. Then between 8.2 and 8.6 it gets angry. Like something's fighting it." "Angry where?" "6. Always 6. Only 6. Only 6. Nathan nodded slowly and said nothing for about 4 seconds. Then he said, "Sounds like a fueling anomaly," and went back to mopping. Marcus walked away. He would remember that conversation for the rest of his life. Nathan picked Emma up at 6:15 every evening from the after-school program at St. Anne's, and he had never once been late, not in 11 months, not on the day his truck's alternator died, and he ran 11 blocks in work boots. That night she climbed into the passenger seat with her backpack in her lap. "Daddy, are you sad?" "No, baby." "You're doing the thing." "What thing?" "The thing where you drive with both hands." She pointed. "You do that when you're thinking about Mom." Nathan let out a breath and put one hand back in his lap. "I'm not thinking about Mom," he said. "Not tonight. I'm thinking about work." "Did somebody break something?" "Something like that." "Can you fix it?" The light turned green. He didn't move for a second, and the guy behind him honked, and Nathan lifted a hand in apology and pulled forward. "Yeah," he said. "I can fix it." "Then why do you look like that?" "Because," Nathan said carefully, "sometimes the fixing part isn't the hard part." Emma thought about that the whole way home, which for a 7-year-old was about 4 minutes, and then she asked if they could have pancakes for dinner, and Nathan said yes, because it was Thursday, and because he could never say no to her twice in 1 week. Day 5, 11:40 p.m. The building was empty, except for the security desk and one set of lights in a hallway that shouldn't have had lights on. Nathan stood in front of the magnetic door of Clean Room 3 with a floor buffer he didn't need and a badge that opened facilities doors only. He stood there for a long time. He thought about Emma's teeth and the $400 he owed the dentist. He thought about a rented duplex with a landlord who'd raised him $90 a month. He thought about the fact that in 11 months, no one in that building had asked him a single question about himself except Danny Brooks. Then he thought about a driver named Kip Sandoval, 24 years old, who was going to sit 6 inches in front of that engine at 190 miles an hour at Sebring in 7 days. And Nathan Carter did the thing that ended everything. He swiped the maintenance override, the one every facilities tech had, the one for fire suppression and water leaks, and the magnetic door clicked open. He worked from 11:52 p.m. to 5:44 a.m. He didn't turn on the main lights. He worked under 2 task lamps with his sleeves rolled and his phone face down on the bench, and if anyone had been standing in that room, they would have seen something they could not have explained. A maintenance technician taking the top end off a $10 million V10 without opening a single manual. He didn't measure twice. He didn't look anything up. At 1:20 a.m., he pulled the number 6 injector, held it up to the lamp, turned it a quarter turn, and made a small sound in his throat, like a man recognizing a face in a crowd. At 2:05 he found the second thing. He sat down on an upturned crate and stared at it for almost 15 minutes. "You changed it," he said out loud to nobody. "Why would you change it?" At 3:30, he was machining a spacer by hand on the shop, lathe 2 rooms over, because the part he needed did not exist in the building, because the part he needed had been deleted from the parts list 4 years ago by someone who did not understand what it was for. At 5:44, he closed the cover, torqued the last fastener, wiped every surface he'd touched, put the tools back exactly where they'd been, and left one thing behind on the bench. A note. Torn off a shipping label. 6 words in block letters: run it. 9,000. It's fine now. He didn't sign it. Then he went out to his truck, drove home, slept for 50 minutes, and made Emma toast. Preston Vaughn found the note at 7:15 a.m. He read it 3 times. He looked at the engine. He looked at the door log on the wall terminal, and the door log said 1 entry. FAC override 2352, and Preston Vaughn's face went through 4 expressions in about 2 seconds, and the last one was not confusion. It was fear. "Nobody touches this," he said to the room. "Nobody says a word until I clear it." "Sir," Marcus said, "somebody already." I said nobody says a word. They put it on the dyno at 9:30, with half the floor watching through the glass. It pulled clean to 8,000. It went through 8,200 like it was nothing. 8,400. 8,600. 8,800. At 9,000 RPM, the Vanguard V10 made a sound that 3 separate men in that room would later describe independently as beautiful. And Marcus Reyes started laughing. Actually, laughing with his hand over his mouth, and a senior tech slapped the glass with both palms. And somebody upstairs must have heard it, because Victoria Hayes came down in the elevator without her jacket on, which nobody had ever seen. "Is it fixed?" Vaughn turned around. He had already decided what he was going to say. He'd had 90 minutes to decide. "It's fixed." "How?" "Fueling," Vaughn said. "Like I told you, injector geometry in 6. We were chasing the symptom instead of the source. My team stayed on it." Victoria looked at the engine, then at him. "Preston, 12 minutes ago you told my assistant you needed an extension. 12 minutes ago I hadn't confirmed the run." She held his eyes for a second longer than was comfortable. "Congratulations," she said. "Don't do that to me again." And she went back to the elevator, and Preston Vaughn breathed out. And behind him, Marcus Reyes stood very still and stared at a torn shipping label in Vaughn's jacket pocket that was sticking out about a half inch. It came apart at 2 p.m. Not because of Marcus. Because of a security audit that ran automatically every Friday and flagged one anomaly, a facilities override on a Tier 0 door at 2352. Compliance called HR. HR called legal. Legal called the CEO's office. By 2:40, Nathan Carter was standing in the executive lobby on the 2nd floor with grease under his fingernails and a broom he had brought with him because nobody had told him he wouldn't be going back to work. Danny Brooks came up the stairs behind him out of breath. "Don't say anything," Danny said low. "Danny." "Nathan, I'm serious. Whatever you did down there, you say I heard a noise. I opened the door, I closed the door. You hear me?" "That's not what happened." "I know what happened." Danny's jaw was tight. I looked at that engine this morning. There's a spacer in there that isn't on any parts list in this building. And there's tool marks on it that came off our lathe. And I've been standing on that floor for 22 years, and I have exactly one guy who can do that, and he mops. Nathan looked at him. You should have told me, Danny said. Told you what? Whatever it is you're not telling me. The door opened. Victoria Hayes did not offer him a seat. That was deliberate. She'd read a book about it once. She stood behind her desk with a tablet in her hand, and Preston Vaughn seated to her right with his legs crossed, and she let 8 full seconds pass before she spoke. Mr. Carter, do you know what a Tier 0 environment is? Yes, ma'am. Tell me. Controlled access, contamination protocol, chain of custody on every component. Her eyebrows moved a millimeter. That was more words than she'd expected. At 11:52 Wednesday night you used a fire safety override to enter clean room 3. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. You were in there for 5 hours and 52 minutes. Yes, ma'am. Doing what? Nathan said, fixing your engine. Preston Vaughn laughed, out loud, a short, ugly bark of a laugh. Victoria. Let him finish. He's a floor tech. Preston. She didn't look away from Nathan. Explain that sentence. Cylinder 6 wasn't a fueling problem, Nathan said. It was a harmonic. The injector was fine. The injector was always fine. Somewhere in the last 4 years, somebody deleted a spacer between the 6 and 8 journals, probably to save 11 grams, probably in a weight reduction pass. And that spacer wasn't structural. It was a damper. Take it out, and you get a torsional node that stacks right at 8,400. That's why it only ever showed in 6. That's why every rebuild passed inspection. There was nothing wrong with the parts. There was something wrong with what was missing. The room went completely silent. Victoria Hayes had heard 1,000 technical explanations in 4 years. Most of them were noise. She was not an engineer, but she was the daughter of one, and she had grown up around a certain sound. The sound of a man who knows a machine the way other men know a language. She'd just heard it, and she did not want to have heard it. Preston, she said. Is that true? Vaughn uncrossed his legs. It's a theory, he said. It's a theory a man with no credentials came up with after the fact, and Victoria. I want to be very careful here because I've seen this exact thing before. Somebody breaks in, changes. One variable gets lucky, and then claims the whole solve. That engine had 11 engineers on it for 5 days. 5 days of documented work. He walked in for 6 hours. And it ran to 9,000, Nathan said. It ran to 9,000 because of 5 days of work. Then why'd you keep my note? The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Vaughn's hand went to his jacket pocket. It was an involuntary movement, and everyone in the room saw it. What note? Victoria said. There's no note. Preston, what note? There's no note, Victoria. Nathan didn't press it. That was the thing about him that would take Victoria Hayes 11 more days to understand. He didn't push. He never pushed. He stated a thing once and then let it sit there and rot in the open air, and if you didn't pick it up, that was your business. Victoria set the tablet down, and then she made the decision that would cost her everything, because in that moment, she was not thinking about the engine. She was thinking about Halvorsen Industrial and $9 million and a homologation inspection in 6 days. And she was thinking that if it ever came out in a deposition in a trade journal, in one loose sentence at a sponsor dinner, that the Vanguard V10 had been saved by an unlicensed maintenance worker who broke into a sealed room in the middle of the night, then Apex Velocity's entire safety certification was worth exactly nothing. She needed the fix. She could not afford the fixer. Mr. Carter, she said, how long have you worked here? 11 months. What's your engineering background? Nathan was quiet for a beat. I've worked on engines a long time. That's not what I asked. Degree certification, PE license, anything? No, ma'am. So you have no formal qualifications of any kind? Not the kind you mean. There's only one kind. She came around the desk. Do you understand what you put at risk if that engine had a defect you introduced and it lets go on a straight at 190 miles an hour, that's not a warranty claim. That's a young man in a box. That's my company in a courtroom for the next 9 years. That's every person on that floor out of a job. I know exactly what it is, Nathan said. That's why I did it. You did it because you wanted to be the hero. And for the first and only time in that room, something moved across Nathan Carter's face. No, he said quietly. I did it because I heard 11 of your engineers say the words fueling anomaly for 5 days, and I knew nobody in this building was going to find it. And I looked at the calendar, and I did the math on how many days that kid Sandoval had left to live. Vaughn stood up. That is a threat. That's an engine, Nathan said. You want to call it a threat? Go ahead. Victoria Hayes looked at him for a long moment. She had a choice in that second. She would replay it later at 3 in the morning more times than she would ever admit to anyone. You're terminated, she said. Effective immediately. Gross violation of Tier 0 access protocol. You'll be paid through the end of the week. Danny Brooks made a sound in the doorway. Victoria. Daniel, one more word, and you're going with him. Then I'm going with him. Danny. Nathan didn't even turn around. Emma's got a dentist bill and you've got a mortgage. Sit down. Danny sat down. They walked him out through the lobby because that was the protocol, and the protocol did not care that it was 3:15 on a Friday, and the entire day shift was coming up from the floor. 40 people watched. Victoria came down with the HR director because she believed, and she would have defended this belief in any boardroom in America, that a leader does the hard thing in public and doesn't hide behind an email. She reached for his badge. Nathan lifted his chin so she could take the lanyard. She got it in her fist. And whatever was in his face, the calm, the total absence of pleading, the way he stood there like a man who had done this before and survived worse. Something about it got under her skin like a splinter, and she pulled harder than she needed to, and the lanyard snapped, and she threw the badge across the floor. It skidded 11 feet and stopped against the base of a display case. You're a janitor with a wrench, Victoria Hayes said. You don't touch a $10 million engine. Ever. Nobody breathed. Nathan walked over, bent down, picked up his badge, looked at the photo on it for a second. His own face 11 months younger. The fake smile of a man taking an ID photo he never wanted taken. He put it in his shirt pocket. Then he walked back and stopped in front of her. Ms. Hayes. We're done. One thing, and then I'm gone, and you'll never see me again. He said it evenly. No heat in it all, which somehow made it worse. Before Sebring, before you put that car on a grid with a kid inside it, go find the original engineering files. Not the archive. Not the digital set. Not the copies Preston's people have been working off of for 4 years. He glanced once at Preston Vaughn. The originals. Paper. They're in the sub-basement in a gray flat file cabinet, 3rd drawer, filed under Program 0. Your father put them there himself. Victoria's mouth opened slightly. How, she said. Would you know what's in my father's cabinet? Nathan didn't answer that. He looked at her one more second, and there was something in it she couldn't name. Not anger, not triumph, something closer to sorrow. And then he turned and pushed through the glass doors into the parking lot and got into a 14-year-old pickup with a booster seat in the back. At 6:15, he picked Emma up from St. Anne's. He was not late. He was never late. Daddy, she said, climbing in. You're early. Yeah. Why are you early? Nathan Carter looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror for a moment, and then he smiled at her, the real one, the one nobody at Apex Velocity Racing had ever seen. Because I've got some free time, he said. Upstairs in an office with a view of the whole valley, Victoria Hayes stood at the window with a broken lanyard still in her hand. Behind her, Preston Vaughn was talking. Something about liability. Something about how she'd handled it perfectly. She wasn't listening. She was thinking about 8 words. Friday, 4:02 p.m. The broken lanyard was still in Victoria Hayes's hand when she finally turned around. Preston, I'm telling you that man is a liability. And frankly, the fact that he knew about a cabinet in the sub-basement tells me he's been going through places he shouldn't. Preston. Yes. Do you know what's in the sub-basement? Preston. Preston Vaughn adjusted his cuff. It took him half a second longer than it should have. Old paper. Nothing. Files your father never digitized because he never trusted a server. Have you been down there? Not in years. How many years? Victoria. He smiled the way men smile when they want a conversation to be over. You've had a very long week. You just terminated an employee in front of 40 people. That's not an easy thing. Go home. She looked at him for 3 full seconds. Good night, Preston, she said. She waited until his car left the lot. Then she took the stairs down all 4 flights in heels past the empty floor and the cold bays and the smell of solvent that never came out of the concrete. And at 4:31, she put her badge against the reader on the sub-basement door and it flashed red. She tried it again. Red. She tried it a 3rd time and a voice behind her said, "It's not going to work." Danny Brooks was standing at the bottom of the stairs with his jacket over his arm. "It's a mechanical lock," he said. "Your dad had it put in after the fire in '09. Badge reader's a dummy. It's been dead for 6 years." "Then where's the key?" "Why?" She turned around. "Excuse me?" I said why. Danny didn't move. 61 years old, 2 bad knees, and he had already been fired once in his life and had discovered it didn't kill him. You want the key to a room you didn't know existed 90 minutes after you threw a man's badge across your own lobby, so I'm asking why. Because he told me to go look. He did. You heard him. I heard him. Danny shifted his jacket to the other arm. You gonna listen to a janitor with a wrench? Victoria closed her eyes for a moment. That was unnecessary, she said. It was worse than unnecessary. It was wrong. Daniel. You want me to say what you want to hear, or you want the key? At 4:39 p.m. Danny Brooks took a ring of keys out of his jacket pocket, sorted through 11 of them, and handed her a brass one that had gone green at the edges. 3rd drawer, he said. Gray flat file back left corner under the tarp. Victoria stopped with the key in the lock. You knew what was down there. I've worked here 22 years. I know where everything is. Then why didn't you ever say anything? Because nobody ever asked me, Danny said. The door took a shoulder to open. Inside it smelled like dust and old ink, and there were 4 filing cabinets and a stack of chairs and a bicycle that had belonged to somebody in 1998, and in the back left corner under a paint-stained tarp was a gray flat file cabinet with 3 wide drawers. Victoria pulled the tarp off. She opened the 3rd drawer. It was empty. Not old empty. Not never used empty. There were 4 rectangular tracks in the dust where something heavy and flat had sat for a very long time. And the dust inside those rectangles was thinner than the dust around them. And at the back of the drawer, there was a paperclip and a snapped rubber band and 1 torn corner of a page, maybe an inch of it, that had caught on the runner when somebody pulled everything out fast. She picked it up. Handwriting on it, 2 words and part of a 3rd. Was right A.B. Victoria stood there in the sub-basement of her own company for a long time. Then she said out loud to nobody, somebody got here first. At 4:58 p.m. She called building security from the corridor and asked for the sub-basement door log, and the guard on duty told her there wasn't one because the reader was dead. She asked for the stairwell camera. He said the stairwell camera fed to the same system as the loading dock, and it kept 96 hours, and yes, ma'am. He could pull it, and did she want the whole 4 days? The whole 4 days, she said. Send it to me. Not to it. To me. Yes, ma'am. And Ray. Ma'am. Nobody knows, I asked. 12 miles away, at 5:20 that evening, Nathan Carter was standing in a kitchen with 3 eggs, half a bag of flour, and a 7-year-old sitting on the counter with her heels drumming against the cabinet door. You said Thursday was pancake night. It was. It's Friday. I'm aware. So why is it pancake night again? Nathan cracked an egg one-handed. Because I said so. That's not a reason. It's the oldest reason there is. Emma considered this. She had a way of considering things that made her look exactly like her mother, and Nathan had learned over 3 years to keep his hands busy when it happened. Daddy, she said. Did you get fired? The whisk stopped for about a quarter of a second. Who told you that? You picked me up early. You never pick me up early, and you're making pancakes on the wrong day. She shrugged. And you keep looking at the mail. Nathan set the bowl down. Yeah, he said. I got fired. Did you do something bad? I did something against the rules. Is that the same thing? No, he said. It isn't. But sometimes people can't tell the difference, and when they can't, you don't get to argue with them. You just go home and make pancakes. Emma frowned. That's not fair. No. Why didn't you tell them? Tell them what, baby? That you're the best one. She said it like it was obvious, like she was explaining that water was wet. You're always the one who fixes it. At the apartment you fixed Mrs. Nolan's heater, and the man from the company couldn't. You fixed my bike. You fixed the ice machine at the Shell station, and they gave you free coffee for a month. Nathan laughed, and it caught in his throat halfway. Why didn't you tell them you were important? He turned the burner down. He took a long moment. Because being important and being valuable are two different things, he said. Important is what people call you. Valuable is what you actually do when nobody's calling you anything at all. One of those you can lose in an afternoon. The other one you keep. Emma thought about that. That's a lot of words for no, she said. Yeah, Nathan said. It is. At 6:47 p.m., his phone rang from a number he didn't know. He almost didn't answer it. He was 3 pancakes in, and Emma was singing to herself, and the ringer went twice before he picked it up. Hello. Is this Nathan Carter? Who's this? My name's Marcus Reyes. I work at Apex. Worked with you, sort of. You mopped outside the clean room, and I asked you a stupid question about a machine trying to tell me something. Nathan closed his eyes. You shouldn't be calling me son. I know. How'd you get this number? Danny. Of course you did. Mr. Carter, I have to tell you something and then you can hang up on me. Marcus was talking fast the way people talk when they've rehearsed it in a car. I took a picture of your note, Wednesday morning, before Vaughn picked it up. I don't know why I did it. The door log said facilities override, and everybody was pretending that was a glitch, and I took a picture. Nathan didn't say anything. Sir, I'm sitting outside the building right now, and I'm looking at a photograph of a shipping label that says, Run at 9,000. It's fine now, and it's in handwriting that isn't anybody's on my team. And this morning I watched Preston Vaughn tell the CEO of this company that his people solved it. You should delete that picture. What? Delete it, Marcus. Why? Because you're 26, and you've got a career, and I've got nothing left to lose, and those are not the same position to stand in. Nathan lowered his voice and stepped away from the kitchen. Listen to me. Whatever's happening in that building, it's been happening for a long time, and it's got nothing to do with you. Go to work Monday. Do your job. There was a pause on the line. There's a new noise, Marcus said. Nathan went still. Say that again. On the second run this afternoon, at load above 8,500. It's not the same thing. It's not 6. I don't know, it's like a tick. Like a stitch. Vaughn says it's the dyno mount. He wants to sign the homologation package Monday morning. Is it under load or on the overrun? Both. Both. Sir, what does that mean? Nathan Carter looked through the doorway at his daughter, who was drawing something on the fogged kitchen window with one finger. It means don't stand in front of it, he said, and he hung up. Saturday, 8:15 a.m. Victoria Hayes was in her office with 4 days of stairwell footage on a laptop and a cup of coffee she'd let go cold. At 8:41 she found it. Wednesday afternoon, 2:52 p.m. 62 minutes after compliance flagged the override, 90 minutes before she fired a man in her lobby. A figure came down the stairwell fast, went out of frame toward the sub-basement door, and came back up 11 minutes later, carrying a flat cardboard portfolio the size of a card table under one arm. She rewound it, watched it again, paused it. The camera was mounted high, and the resolution was garbage, but you could see the cuff. You could see the watch on the left wrist worn face inward, the way a certain man had worn it for as long as she'd known him, because he'd told her once at a sponsored dinner that a Patek shouldn't announce itself. Victoria set her coffee down very carefully like it might go off. At 9:04 she called him. Victoria. Preston Vaughn sounded like he was on a golf course. He was on a golf course. It's Saturday. I have a question, and I'd like a straight answer. Always. When was the last time you were in the sub-basement? There was wind on the line, 3 seconds of it. I told you, years. Preston, I'm looking at you on camera Wednesday at 2:52 in the afternoon. 4 seconds this time. Then he laughed warm, easy, the laugh of a man who has been in rooms his whole life. Oh, for God's sake, yes, Wednesday. I went down to pull the legacy homologation binders because if that engine was going to be questioned, I wanted the paper trail from the first generation. Which, by the way, was exactly the right instinct, because on Monday, I'm going to be signing a package that Halverson's people will tear apart line by line. You told me you hadn't been down there in years. You asked me on the worst afternoon of my quarter. I misspoke. You misspoke. Victoria. His voice dropped into the register he used when he wanted to sound like her father. I have run technical for this company for 11 years. I have never once put you in a position you couldn't defend. Are we really doing this because a maintenance worker said a spooky sentence on his way out the door? She looked at the torn corner of paper on her desk. 2 words and part of a third. Where are the files now? In my office. I want them. Monday. Now. Victoria, I'm on the 12th hole. Then finish your round, she said, and bring me every page you took out of that drawer, and Preston, I'm going to count them. She hung up before he could answer. At 10:20 that morning, she went down to the floor. It was Saturday, and there were 4 people working, and every one of them stopped when she came through the door, and she felt the temperature change the way you feel a cloud go over. And it occurred to her for the first time in 4 years that these people were afraid of her, and that she had always assumed that was respect. Danny Brooks was at the parts counter. It was empty, she said. Figured. You knew it'd be empty. I knew somebody's been nervous since Wednesday, and it wasn't you. Danny put down his clipboard. You want to tell me what you're looking for now, or you want to keep doing this one question at a time? I don't know what I'm looking for. That's the first honest thing anybody upstairs has said to me since your father died. Victoria let that land. She'd taken worse hits that week. Danny, how long have you known what? That he wasn't a maintenance tech. Danny leaned on the counter. I didn't know anything, he said. I noticed. There's a difference. He held up one finger. First week he's here, we've got a Tier 1 gearbox that 3 guys can't get the main shaft out of. He walks by, doesn't stop walking, and says, try heating the case, not the shaft. Which is right, and which is backwards from what the manual says, and which nobody on this floor knows except guys who've built one from scratch. Second finger. Month 4, he's cleaning under the dyno, and the load cell reads 11% off, and he tells the tech his calibration weight's been dropped. Nobody dropped it in front of him. He could hear it in the readout. Third finger. Month 7, he's standing at the coffee machine, and Reyes and 2 other kids are arguing about torsional damping, and I watched him listen to that argument for about a minute and a half with his back turned, and his whole body was screaming at him to correct them, and he just poured his coffee and walked away. And you never asked. I asked once. Danny shrugged. I said, Nathan, where'd you learn all this? And he said, from a guy who's dead. And he said it in a voice that closed the door. And I've been around long enough to know when a man's closed a door. Danny. Victoria's throat was tight, and she hated it. He told me my father put those files there himself. I know, I heard him. How would he know that? Danny Brooks looked at her for a long moment. Ma'am, he said, I've been asking myself that question for 18 hours, and every answer I come up with makes me feel sick. At 12:40 p.m., in a rented duplex on the east side. Nathan Carter was on the floor with a cereal box and a pair of scissors because Emma had decided the paper trophy needed a paper base. It keeps falling over. That's because you built it top-heavy. Fix it. You fix it. You're the fixer. Not anymore, Nathan said, and Emma looked up sharply because kids hear the thing under the thing. Are we going to be poor? Nathan set down the scissors. Where'd you hear that word? Bailey's mom said it about Bailey's dad. We're not going to be poor. Promise. Nathan looked at his daughter and thought about $1,100 a month and $400 at the dentist, and about 2 weeks of cushion in an account at a credit union. I promise you, he said, that you will never once go to bed hungry, and you will never once go to school in something that doesn't fit. That's the promise I can make. And I have never broken a promise to you. Emma studied him. Okay, she said, and went back to the trophy. At 1:15, there was a knock at the door. Emma got there first, because she always got there first, and Nathan came out of the kitchen with a dish towel and found a young man in a wrinkled polo standing on his step, holding a laptop bag with both hands like it was a kid brother. I told you not to call me, Nathan said. I didn't call you, Marcus said. I drove. Who's this? Emma said. This is Marcus. Marcus, Emma. Emma, go in the back. But. Back. She went but slowly, and she left the door of the back room open by about 4 inches, and both men knew it. Nathan didn't ask him in. Sir, they're signing it Monday. Then they're signing it Monday. There's a tick in the number 4 bank, and Vaughn is calling it a dyno mount, and I have run the mount 4 separate ways, and it is not the mount. Marcus's voice cracked in the middle of it. I'm 26 years old, and I'm the only person in that room saying anything. And every time I open my mouth, Vaughn looks at me like I'm a summer intern who got lost. So stop opening your mouth. What? Stop talking and start writing. Nathan folded the dish towel. Every time you tell him it's not the mount, you're giving him a chance to say no in a room with no record. Write it down. Email. Time-stamped. Copy yourself. Say exactly what you observed. Say exactly what you recommended say. Exactly what you were told, and then do what they tell you. Marcus stared at him. That's it. That's your advice. Cover myself. That's my advice. People could die. Yes, Nathan said. They could, and you're okay with that. Something happened in Nathan's face that Marcus Reyes would not be able to describe to anyone afterward. Son, he said quietly. In about 11 days, you're going to understand exactly how not okay with that I am. Right now, the single most useful thing in the world you can do is be a witness that nobody can fire. Marcus swallowed. Can I ask you one thing? One. And then I'll go. Ask. On the overrun. Why does it matter that it's on the overrun too? Nathan looked past him at the street for a second. Because a mount can only rattle when something's pushing on it, he said. If it's still there when nothing's pushing, then whatever's making that noise isn't reacting to the engine. It's part of it. Marcus's mouth opened. That's the whole answer, Nathan said. That's all you get. Now go home. He shut the door. He stood behind it with his hand flat on the wood for about 10 seconds, and then he heard a small voice from 4 inches of open doorway. Daddy? Is that man in trouble? No, baby. Are you? No. You're doing the both hands thing, Emma said, but with the door. Sunday, 7:50 a.m. Victoria Hayes let herself into the building on a weekend for the second day in a row and went first to the lobby because she'd walked past it 11,000 times and had never once actually looked at it. The first-generation Vanguard sat on a black plinth under 3 spotlights sectioned open on one side, so you could see the internals exactly as it had come out of the car that won at Watkins Glen 12 years ago. Her father had put it there. She could still hear him say it. Every company should have to look its own beginning in the face on the way to the coffee machine. There was a brass plaque at the base. Vanguard Generation 1. Designed and developed by the Apex Velocity Engineering Group, under the direction of Preston Vaughn, Chief Technical Officer. Victoria had read that plaque 1,000 times. She read it again now, and something about it sat wrong in her mouth like a coin. Preston had come to Apex 11 years ago. She knew that. She'd been at his hiring dinner. She'd been 27 and half drunk on white wine, and her father had introduced Preston to the table as the man who's going to help me keep all this running. The Watkins Glen car was 12 years old. Victoria stood in her own lobby, doing arithmetic on her fingers like a child. At 8:15, she went and got a flashlight from the security desk And Ray asked if everything was all right, and she said everything was fine, and she went back and got down on her knees in a $500 skirt in front of a display engine and put the light up into the sectioned crankcase. It took her 4 minutes. Down, inside on a flat pad, on the inner wall of the case, in a place that no customer, no photographer, no journalist, and no board member would ever see, somebody had machined 3 characters into the aluminum. NC-14. Victoria's hands went cold. She heard footsteps behind her at 8:23, and she did not stand up. "Ray, come here a second." "Ma'am." "Look in there and tell me what you see." Ray Delgado, 59 security, had never once been asked to look at anything in that building. He got down, slowly took the light and squinted. Letters, NC, and a 14. "You see it too?" "I see it, ma'am." Victoria stood up. Her knees were shaking, and she was furious at them for it. "Ray, does that mean anything to you?" "No, ma'am." He handed the flashlight back. "But I'll tell you guys who build things sign 'em. My uncle poured concrete 40 years. Every driveway in this county's got his initials in the corner. He'd say, put your name on it or don't put your hands on it." "That's the whole engine," Victoria said. "That's the engine that made this company." "Yes, ma'am." "There's a plaque out front with a name on it." "Yes, ma'am," Ray said, and had the decency not to say the rest. At 9:40. Victoria was in HR's server with an administrator override, pulling the personnel file for Nathan Carter, maintenance technician, hired 11 months ago. It was 3 pages long. Prior employment, 2 entries. A truck fleet garage in Reno, 4 years. An agricultural equipment dealer before that. References checked both fine. Background check clean. No degree listed. No certifications listed. Emergency contact, 1 name, 1 number. D. Brooks. And the whole thing was too clean. Not falsified. Nothing you could point at. Just a life with a hole in it. A man with no history before the age of 31. A resume that started in the middle of a sentence. Victoria sat back. She typed NC into the search field of the archive system and got 4,000 results. She typed Program 0 and got nothing. She typed Watkins Glen 2014 and got 1,100 photographs, and she started clicking through them at 10:05 in the morning, and she was still clicking at 11:30, and somewhere around image 600. She found a wide shot of a victory celebration. 30 people around a car, champagne and a trophy, and her father in the middle of it with his shirt sleeves rolled. And off to the left at the edge of the frame, half turned away from the camera, was a young man in a team polo with grease to the elbows who was not looking at the trophy. He was looking at the engine. Victoria zoomed in until the image broke into squares. Then she went into her father's old office, which she had never converted and never emptied, and had told herself was about respect, and was actually about not being ready. And she opened the bottom drawer of his desk, where he'd kept a spiral notebook he wrote in during every race weekend for 19 years. She found the 2014 notebook. She found Watkins Glen. Her father's handwriting, blue ink, cramped, unlovely, unmistakable. 3rd stint. Fuel pressure sag on the banking. Everyone says pump. Calder says harmonic. Told them to listen to the kid. Kid was right. Victoria turned the page. Kid is going to be the best engine man in this country in 10 years if I can keep him from disappearing into a garage somewhere. And on the last page of the weekend alone, underlined twice. Program 0 is Calder's. All of it. Whatever happens, remember that. Victoria Hayes sat on the floor of her dead father's office with a notebook in her lap at 12:14 on a Sunday afternoon, and she said the name out loud into an empty room, and it came out barely above a whisper. Calder. Sunday, 12:31 p.m. Victoria Hayes typed the name into the archive search field with 2 fingers because her hands weren't steady. Calder. 940 results. She opened the first one, and it was a purchase order from 2013 for billet aluminum requisitioned by N. Calder Powertrain. She opened the second one, and it was a meeting minute from 2012, listing 11 attendees, and the 9th name down was N. Calder Design Lead Program 0. She opened the third, and it was a photograph of a whiteboard covered in equations, and in the bottom right corner of that whiteboard, Somebody had drawn a stick figure of a car with a smiley face on it, and under the smiley face it said, "Emma's design, do not erase." Victoria sat back in her father's chair and put her hand over her mouth. At 12:52, she called Danny Brooks. He answered on the second ring. "It's Sunday." "His name is Calder." There was a silence on the other end that went on so long she checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. "Danny." "I'm here. Nathan Calder. He was the design lead on the first Vanguard. He wasn't on the team, Danny, he was the team. There are 900 documents in this system with his name on them, and every single one of them stops in the spring of 2015. "Yeah," Danny said. "You knew." "No. I knew of a Calder." His voice had gone rough. 22 years, ma'am. I was on second shift back then. We never met. He worked out of the design annex, and I worked the floor, and all I ever heard was that your dad had a kid up there who could hear things nobody else could hear. And then one day, he was gone, and nobody said why. And about 6 months after that, anybody who said the name out loud got looked at funny. And after a while, people stopped saying it. Why did he leave? I don't know. Danny? Ma'am, I'm 61 years old, and I've told you more true things in 2 days than I told your father in 10 years. I don't know. Victoria closed her eyes. I need you to find me somebody who does, she said. At 2:05 that afternoon, Danny Brooks called her back with a phone number for a woman named Ruth Yeager, who had run human resources at Apex Velocity for 26 years and had retired in 2019, to a house near the reservoir with 4 cats and a strong opinion about most things. Victoria called her at 2:11, and Ruth Yeager listened to about 40 seconds of it before she interrupted. You're Gordon's daughter? Yes, ma'am. You sound like him when you're upset. He got fast like that, too. A pause. You want to ask about Nate Calder. You remember him. Honey, I processed his separation myself. I remember every one of those. There was the sound of the chair. His wife was killed in March of 2015. She was driving back from her sister's on the interstate, and a commercial truck came across the median. It wasn't anybody's fault, except the truck's. She was 33 years old, and their daughter was 14 months. Victoria's throat closed. He came in the next week, Ruth said. He didn't cry. That's the part I never forgot. He sat in my office and he was so polite. He filled out the forms. He asked whether he could keep the health coverage for the baby for 90 days, and I told him yes. And then he asked me one question, and it was the strangest question anybody's ever asked me in that chair. What did he ask? He asked if the engines would be all right without him. Victoria pressed the heel of her hand against her eye. Ms. Yeager, did he sign anything on the way out? Any assignment of intellectual property? Any release? Any? He signed everything. Ruth's voice sharpened. That's what I've been waiting 30 seconds to tell you. He signed a full assignment. Everything he ever designed, every drawing, every calculation, all of it went to the company, and he didn't ask for $1, and he didn't ask for a name on anything. And I sat there and I said, Nate, honey, you need to have a lawyer look at this. And he said, Ruth, I don't want to argue with anybody. I just want to go home. Do you know where those papers are? They were in the vault in the sub-basement, Ruth said, along with everything else Program 0. Your father put them there himself. He didn't trust the server. At 2:40, Victoria hung up the phone and looked at the torn corner of paper on her desk. 1 inch of it, 2 words, and part of a third, in a dead man's handwriting. Was right, A.B. She thought about a stairwell camera, a cardboard portfolio the size of a card table, a man on a golf course who had misspoken. At 2:44, she called Preston Vaughn, and it went to voicemail. At 2:45, she called him again, and it went to voicemail. At 2:47, she sent one text message. Monday morning, 7 a.m., my office. Bring the files. He answered in 9 seconds. Signing is at 8. Let's talk after. Victoria looked at that message for a long time. Then she typed, deleted it, typed again, and sent 7. He didn't respond. At 3:20, she called Ray at the security desk and told him that effective immediately, no one entered the sub-basement, the design annex, or any archive space in that building without her personal authorization, and that if Preston Vaughn's badge came through any door in the building before 7 a.m. Monday, she wanted a phone call, not an email, no matter the hour. Ma'am. Ray hesitated. Am I allowed to ask if something's wrong? Yes, Victoria said. Something's wrong. At 5:15 on Sunday evening, Marcus Reyes was sitting in his car outside a physical therapy clinic in the east end of the city, waiting for his brother to come out. Ely Reyes came through the doors at 5:22 with a cane in his right hand and the slow, careful walk of a man who had learned exactly how much his spine would forgive him for. He was 31. 4 years ago, he had been 27 and a development driver and the fastest thing Apex Velocity had ever put in a seat. He got into the passenger side with a grunt. You look terrible, he said. Thanks. Seriously, when'd you sleep? Tuesday. Marcus put both hands on the wheel and didn't start the car. Eli, I need you to tell me about the crash again. Eli went very still. No. Please. We don't do this. I know we don't do this. Marcus, I have a routine. I have a thing I do where I get up and I go to work and I don't think about it. And it took me 2.5 years to build that, and I'm not. There's a tick in the number 4 bank, Marcus said. Eli stopped. What did you say? On the new engine, above 8,500, underload and on the overrun both. Vaughn says it's the dyno mount, and he's signing homologation at 8 tomorrow morning and putting it in a car at Sebring on Saturday with Kip Sandoval inside it. Eli Reyes stared through the windshield. Say the second part again, he said quietly. About the overrun. It's there when nothing's pushing. Yeah. Eli laughed and there was no humor anywhere in it. Yeah, it was there when nothing was pushing. Marcus turned in his seat. Eli, I told them. His hands had started to shake, and he pressed them flat against his thighs to stop it. I told them 4 times. I wrote it in the debrief. I said there's a stitch in it, that's the word I used, a stitch like something skipping a beat, and it's there when I lift off the throttle at the end of the back straight, and Vaughn sat in that debrief and told me a driver's job is to drive, and an engineer's job is to interpret data, and then he told the room I had a tendency to over-report. And then, 11 days later at the proving ground, the crank let go at 9,000 and put a rod through the case and locked the rear wheels at 162 miles an hour. Eli's voice had gone flat and mechanical, the voice of a man reading a page he'd memorized so he wouldn't have to feel it. And the incident report said driver error, downshift error, money shift. It said I selected 3rd instead of 5th. You didn't. Of course I didn't. He turned and looked at his brother, and his eyes were wet and furious. I was 4 years in that seat. I never money shifted a car in my life, and they wrote it in a report, and I signed a settlement, and they paid my medical, and I signed a piece of paper that says I don't talk about it, and that's how I stopped being a race car driver and started being a guy who does aquatic therapy on Sundays. The car was silent for a while. Eli, Marcus said. Who took the spacer out? What spacer? There was a damper spacer between the 6 and 8 journals in the original design. Somebody deleted it in a weight reduction pass 4 years ago. 11 grams. I found the change order Friday night at midnight, and it's got 1 signature on it. Eli didn't ask whose. Marcus, he said, you need to be very, very careful. I know. No, you don't. Eli grabbed his brother's forearm. I need you to hear me. That man let me take the blame for a mechanical failure that he caused, and he did it in a room with 9 people in it, and every one of those 9 people is still working there. Do you understand what that means? It means 9 people watched it happen and went back to their desks. Marcus put his hand over his brother's hand. There's a 10th guy, he said, and he doesn't work there anymore. Monday, 6:34 a.m. Victoria Hayes was already in her office when the call came from the front desk. Ma'am, he's here. How long has he been here? Since 5:50. Where? He went up to his office and he's been there since. Ma'am, he had a bag. What kind of bag? A duffel. The kind you'd put files in. Victoria stood up. At 6:41, she opened the door of Preston Vaughn's office without knocking and found him at the shredder. He didn't stop when she came in. That was the thing that undid her later when she went over it. He glanced up, saw the CEO of the company standing in his doorway at 20 minutes to 7 in the morning, and he fed another page into the machine. "You're early," he said. "Preston. I'm cleaning out 11 years of duplicates." Another page. "Do you have any idea how much redundant paper accumulates in a technical office every revision, every superseded print?" "Stop. Victoria." I said stop. He stopped. He straightened up, and there was a cardboard portfolio open on the credenza behind him, the size of a card table, and it was maybe a third empty. Victoria walked past him and put her hand flat on it. "Whose is this?" "It's company property." "That is not what I asked you." She was surprised at how calm her voice came out. "I asked whose it is." Vaughn's jaw set. "Get out of my office." "Excuse me. You heard me. Get out of my office. I have a signing in 80 minutes with the most important sponsor in the history of this company, and I am not going to spend it being interrogated by a woman who has never in her life torqued a fastener." The room went absolutely quiet, and Victoria Hayes, who had spent 4 years being careful, who had spent 4 years proving she was serious, who had swallowed a version of that sentence in some form or another at every trade dinner and every board meeting since her father's funeral, discovered something about herself she had not known. She wasn't afraid of him. "Nathan Calder," she said. Preston Vaughn's face did not move. That was the tell. A man who has never heard a name looks confused. Vaughn looked like a man holding a door shut. "Who?" "Design Lead Program 0. 940 documents. All of them ending in March of 2015. That was before my time." "You came here in the fall of 2015, Victoria said. 6 months after he left. My father hired you to run technical because the man who actually built the engines had just buried his wife and gone home to raise a 14-month-old baby, and there was nobody left who could read the drawings." "That is a fantasy." "There's a plaque in my lobby with your name on it under an engine that was designed 3 years before you got here. The board approved that plaque. The board approved a summary you wrote." Vaughn's hands were shaking now. He put them in his pockets. "You are about to do something extraordinarily stupid," he said. "Am I?" "You have a signing in 76 minutes. I'm aware of the calendar, Preston." He looked at her and something changed in his face, and he tried the other thing. The warm thing, the voice he used at sponsor dinners. "Victoria." He came half a step closer. "I have protected this company for 11 years. Everything you inherited, everything you sell, everything. Halvorson is buying, runs on a program that I have kept alive through 3 regulation changes and a recession. Yes, Calder started it. Yes. He was brilliant, and he was 29, and he quit. He walked away. He signed the assignment. And I stayed, and I did the work, and for 11 years I carried it. And if my name is on a plaque, it is because I was here." Victoria let him finish. "Where is the damper spacer?" she said. Preston Vaughn stopped breathing for about a second and a half. "What?" "Between the 6 and 8 journals. 11 grams. Deleted in a weight reduction pass in the spring of 2022. Change order 4419. She reached into her jacket and put a folded page on the desk between them. "One signature." "You have no idea what you're looking at." "Then explain it to me." "It was a legitimate engineering decision made with the data available at the time. It was a damper, Preston. It wasn't structure. It was there to kill a torsional node, and you took it out to save 11 grams, and you did it because you couldn't read the drawing well enough to know why it was there in the first place. That is. And 11 days later, a development car let go at the proving ground at 162 miles an hour, and you told a room full of people it was a money shift." Preston Vaughn sat down. He didn't mean to. His legs did it. At 7:06 a.m., Victoria Hayes stood in the doorway of his office and called security on her cell phone, with her eyes on him the whole time. "Ray, Preston Vaughn's badge is suspended as of right now, every door including the lot. I want 2 people up here. Nothing leaves this office. Not a page, not a laptop, not a phone." "Yes, ma'am." She hung up. "You're going to lose Halvorson," Vaughn said to the floor. "Probably. $9 million. Yes. You're going to have to tell them why. Yes. He looked up at her, and there was something almost pleading in it now. Victoria, that engine is fine. He fixed it. Whatever he is, whatever he was, he put the spacer back and the thing pulls to 9,000 clean, and there is nothing wrong with it. Then what's the tick in the number 4 bank? Silence. Marcus Reyes wrote you 4 emails, Victoria said. Friday, Saturday, twice yesterday. You answered one of them with the word noted. It's the dyno mount. It's on the overrun. Vaughn's mouth opened. He looked for a second honestly bewildered, and Victoria realized with a slow, cold horror that he did not know what that meant. Either that he had never known that the man who had run technical at Apex Velocity Racing for 11 years genuinely could not tell the difference between a mount that rattled and a machine that was coming apart from the inside. Get up, she said. At 7:52, 8 minutes before the homologation signing. Victoria Hayes walked into a conference room with 2 lawyers, 3 Halverson executives, a homologation officer from the sanctioning body, and a table with a document on it in a leather folder. She did not sit down. Good morning. My name is Victoria Hayes, and I'm the chief executive of this company, and I'm not signing this today. The room made a noise. The senior Halvorsen man, a man named Whitfield, with white eyebrows and 40 years in industrial manufacturing, put down his coffee. Ms. Hayes, I have an unresolved acoustic anomaly in the number 4 bank of that engine, and a junior engineer who has reported it 4 times in writing, and a chief technical officer who dismissed it 4 times without a test. She kept her voice level. It cost her everything she had. I also have reason to believe that a similar anomaly was misreported 4 years ago, and that a driver was blamed for a mechanical failure. I have suspended my CTO as of 46 minutes ago, pending an investigation, and I will not put a car on a grid at Sebring on Saturday with a young man inside it until I know what that noise is. Whitfield was quiet for a moment. You understand what this costs you? I've done the arithmetic. 9 million on the 14th. I understand. And the entry? We'll withdraw. One of her own lawyers said, Victoria, in a low, warning voice, and she didn't look at him. Whitfield leaned back in his chair and studied her the way men of that generation study a thing they were not expecting. Ms. Hayes, he said, I knew your father for 19 years. I know. I sat across a table from him in 2011, and he pulled a car out of a race that we had paid for because he didn't like a wheel bearing. Whitfield picked his coffee back up. Halverson isn't going anywhere. Find your noise. At 8:40 on the shop floor. Danny Brooks got a phone call from the CEO's office and put the receiver down and stood there for a second with his hand still on it. Then he turned around and said in a voice they heard in every corner of that bay, Everybody, shut it down. Nothing runs today. Everything on the dyno comes off and goes on a stand. Somebody said, Says who? Says the boss. Which one? The one that's left, Danny said, at 9:15. Marcus Reyes was summoned to the 4th floor for the first time in his life, and he walked into the CEO's office with his laptop bag held in both hands, and he was so sure he was being fired that he had already decided what he was going to say. Victoria Hayes stood up when he came in. That was the first thing that went wrong with his plan. Nobody stood up for him. Mr. Reyes, ma'am, before you say anything, I want to say that I stand behind every email I sent, and if you want my badge, you can have it, but I'm going to keep saying the same thing on the way out. Victoria looked at him. Sit down, please, she said. I want you to tell me everything you know about a maintenance technician named Nathan Carter, and then I want you to tell me about your brother. Marcus's knees actually gave out a little. He sat. How do you, he started. Because I read your personnel file, she said, and your emergency contact is Elias Reyes, and I have spent the last 11 hours reading an incident report with his name on it. At 11:40 that morning, Nathan Carter was in the office of a temp agency on the north side, filling out a form on a clipboard with a pen that kept skipping. Prior employment. He wrote the truck fleet garage in Reno. He wrote the agricultural equipment dealer. He looked at the third line for a long moment, and then he left it blank. The way he had left it blank on 9 other forms in 11 months, the way he had been leaving it blank for years. The woman behind the desk took the clipboard. "You've got a big gap here." "Yes, ma'am." "Anything I should know about I have to ask." "No record," Nathan said. "Nothing like that. I took some years off. Family." "Kids." "1." She looked at him over her glasses. She had been doing this a long time. "You want warehouse or you want mechanical?" "Mechanical pays better, but it's nights." Nathan thought about a 7-year-old at St. Anne's at 6:15. "Warehouse," he said. At 1:06 p.m., his phone rang from a number he didn't know for the second time in 3 days. "Hello. Is this Nathan Calder?" The pen stopped. The whole world stopped for about 2 seconds in the parking lot of a temp agency on a Monday afternoon. "Who is this Victoria Hayes?" Nathan closed his eyes. "Ma'am, I'm not going to sue you," he said. "If that's the call. I signed everything a long time ago, and I don't want anything, and you don't have to." "That's not the call." "Then I don't know what to say to you." "You can start," Victoria said, and her voice cracked right down the middle of it, "by telling me why there are 3 letters machined into the inside of the crankcase of the engine in my lobby." Silence on the line. 14 was the block number, Nathan said finally. "Prototype 14. 13 didn't survive. And NC. Habit." A long breath. "Guy who taught me poured concrete for 40 years. He used to say put your name on it or don't put your hands on it." Victoria laughed once, and it came out as something closer to a sob. "Ray said the same to me yesterday morning." "Ray Delgado." "You know him." "He's been on that desk 11 years, Nathan said. "He's got a granddaughter with a heart thing. He asks about Emma every single morning. He's the only one in that whole building who knew her name." Victoria pressed her fingers against her mouth and did not make a sound. "Mr. Calder." "Carter." "Mr. Calder," she said again. "I need to tell you 3 things, and then I need to ask you 1 question, and I want you to let me get all the way through it." "All right." "I stopped the homologation signing this morning. The car doesn't run at Sebring on Saturday. I've suspended Preston Vaughn, and I have a forensic team coming Wednesday, and I've told Halverson the truth." Nathan didn't say anything. "Second, I know about Eli Reyes." She heard him inhale. "Third." Victoria's voice went unsteady, and she let it. "I found my father's notebook from Watkins Glen. He wrote about you. He wrote kid's going to be the best engine man in this country in 10 years if I can keep him from disappearing into a garage somewhere." The line was quiet for a long time. "He was a good man," Nathan said. "Your dad." "Mr. Calder, my question is." "I know what your question is." "Then answer it." And Nathan Carter, standing in a parking lot with a clipboard under his arm and $1,100 of rent due. On the first asked the only thing he actually wanted to know. "Is the driver safe?" Victoria Hayes put her free hand flat on her father's desk to hold herself up. "That's it," she said. "That's your question. After what I did to you in front of 40 people, that's your question." "That's my question," Nathan said. "Is he safe?" "He's safe. The car's on a stand. Nobody's driving anything." "Then find that tick before you put him in it," Nathan said. "And Ms. Hayes, when you open it up, look at the number 4 main bearing cap and check whether somebody changed the fastener spec when they did the weight pass. Because if they took 11 grams out of one place, they took it out of 6 places, and a man who doesn't know what a damper is doesn't know what a clamp load is either." Victoria was writing it down before he finished the sentence. "Come back," she said. "No." "Nathan." "Ma'am, I have to be at St. Anne's at 6:15, he said, "and I have never once been late." And he hung up. At 4:50 that afternoon, Marcus Reyes and 2 technicians pulled the number 4 main bearing cap off the Vanguard V10 on a stand in Clean Room 3 with the CEO of the company standing 3 feet away in a $500 skirt and a borrowed pair of shop glasses. Marcus put a torque wrench on the first fastener to check the residual, and it broke loose 40% light. He sat back on his heels. "Ma'am," he said, "you need to look at this." Victoria Hayes crouched down beside him with the shop glasses sliding on her nose. Say it in words I can use. That fastener should have been at 110 Newton meters of residual clamp. It came loose at 66. Marcus's voice was doing something strange. Ma'am, that's not a tolerance issue. That's a different bolt. Check the next one. He checked the next one. 71. Next. 68. Next. By 5:20 p.m., they had 6 fasteners on a clean rag on the bench, and every one of them was light, and Marcus Reyes stood up with a caliper in his hand, and his face had gone the color of paper. They're not the same grade, he said. They look identical, same head, same drive, same finish. But the spec on the original print calls for a 2-piece cold-formed fastener with a rolled thread after heat treat, and these are cut thread. You can see it under a loop. Somebody swapped the supplier. When? Spring of 2022. The weight pass. The weight pass. Marcus set the caliper down. Ma'am, cut thread fasteners in a rotating assembly at 9,000 RPM. That's not a cost saving. That's a countdown. Danny Brooks had come in 11 minutes earlier and had not said a word the entire time. I was standing at the end of the bench with his arms folded and his jaw working. Danny, Victoria said, you've been standing there like a statue. I'm doing math. On what? On how many of those went into how many engines? Danny finally looked up. That change order was 2022. We've built 41 production units since 2022. Customer cars, track day cars. There's a man in Scottsdale with 2 of them. The room went quiet. Victoria stood up slowly. Marcus? Ma'am. How fast can you get me the serial list? Tonight. Then get it tonight. And Danny. Ma'am. I need every one of those cars off the road by Friday. Danny Brooks blinked at her. That's a recall, he said. Yes. That's a public recall on a car that costs what a house costs on an engine that this company built its whole name on. That's a front page in every trade paper in the country, and probably the real papers too. I'm aware. You'd be admitting a defect that nobody's found yet. Nobody's crashed. Nobody's asking. Victoria pulled off the shop glasses and handed them back to him. Danny, 41 people bought a machine from us because they trusted a name on a valve cover, she said. I don't get to keep the name and skip the part where it means something. Danny Brooks looked at her for a long moment. Then he took the glasses. Your dad would have said it uglier, he said, but he'd have said the same thing. At 8:40 that night, Victoria was still in the building when her general counsel, a careful man named Alan Pruitt, came in and shut the door with the particular gentleness of a lawyer who is about to say no. I've been on the phone with our insurer for 2 hours. And they'd like you to reconsider the word defect. Would they? Victoria, if you announce a manufacturing defect on the Vanguard platform, you are handing a plaintiff's attorney a signed confession for every incident involving that engine going back 4 years. Pruitt sat down without being asked, including the Proving Ground incident. I know that. Do you? Because that file is closed. Driver error. Signed settlement. Signed non-disclosure. That is finished, and if you open it, it isn't finished, and the number on the other side of that is not 9 million, it's somewhere north of 40. Alan, I'm not finished. There's a second thing, and it's worse. He set a folder on her desk. Preston Vaughn's employment agreement has an indemnification clause. Your father's lawyers wrote it in 2015 to attract a senior technical officer away from a competitor. If you terminate him for cause, and he contests it, this company pays his defense, out of our pocket, against ourselves. Victoria looked at the folder and didn't open it. How much of the last 2 days did you already know about? She said. Pruitt's face flickered. Excuse me. You've had the incident report in your files for 4 years. You've had that indemnification clause since you drafted it. And this morning I told a room full of people that a driver was blamed for a mechanical failure, and you said one word to me, and the word was Victoria in a tone. She leaned forward. So I'm asking, did you know? I knew the report was thin, Pruitt said. Thin. I knew it was thin, and I knew a settlement closed it, and I knew that was the outcome the company needed. He didn't look away. He had been doing this for 30 years, and he had made his peace with it a long time ago. That was my job, Victoria. I am not going to sit here and pretend it wasn't. And what's your job now? Alan Pruitt was quiet. Now, he said. Now I suppose it's to tell you exactly how expensive the right thing is and then help you do it anyway. Victoria opened the folder. Tuesday, 7:12 a.m. Kip Sandoval walked into the conference room in a team polo and jeans with his sunglasses pushed up in his hair. 24 years old, 3 weeks out from the biggest race of his life, and he sat down across from the chief executive of Apex Velocity Racing and said, "So am I fired, or are we not racing? Because those are the only two versions I came up with on the drive." "We're not racing," Kip exhaled. "Okay, why?" "Because if you had driven that car at Sebring on Saturday, I believe the engine would have failed." He laughed. It was a reflex, the laugh of a kid who has been told his whole life that machines are somebody else's problem. "Ma'am, engines fail. That's like the job." "Not like this." "Then tell me like what?" Victoria slid a photograph across the table. 6 fasteners on a rag. "There are 6 fasteners in the bottom end of that engine that are the wrong grade," she said. "At a certain load, they let the bearing cap move. When the bearing cap moves, the crankshaft goes out of alignment, and at 9,000 revolutions per minute, the crankshaft breaks, and when the crankshaft breaks, it comes through the case, and when it comes through the case, it takes the oil with it and puts it under the rear tires at whatever speed you happen to be doing at the time." Kip Sandoval stopped smiling. "That's the back straight," he said. "Yes." "At Sebring the back straight is 185/190. "Yes." He sat there for a second. "Who found it?" he said. "A 26-year-old engineer named Marcus Reyes found the fasteners yesterday afternoon." "And who told him where to look?" Victoria hesitated for the first time in the conversation. "A maintenance technician," she said, "that I fired in the lobby on Friday in front of 40 people. Kip Sandoval stared at her. "The mop guy," he said. "You knew him. Everybody on the floor knew him. He's the guy who..." Kip stopped. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Okay, this is going to sound stupid. Back in February, I was doing seat fitting, and I came out to the lot at like 10 at night, and my truck wouldn't turn over, and everybody was gone except him, and he came over with a flashlight and had it running in about 4 minutes. And I tried to give him $40, and he wouldn't take it, and I said, 'Come on, man,' and he said, 'Take your daughter to breakfast with it.' And I don't have a daughter. I said that. And he goes, 'Then take somebody.'" Victoria pressed her lips together. "Ma'am." Kip leaned forward. "You fired him?" "Yes." "For what?" "For fixing an engine he wasn't authorized to touch." The driver sat back in his chair, and for the first time that morning, he looked older than 24. "That's the worst thing I ever heard," he said. At 9:05. Tuesday, the forensic team arrived a day early. 4 people from an independent lab in Indianapolis, and by 10:30, they had confirmed what Marcus found and had started pulling every fastener on both banks. At 10:52, Victoria got a call from Ray at the front desk. "Ma'am, Mr. Vaughn is in the lot. His badge is suspended." "Yes, ma'am, it's suspended. That's how I know he's in the lot. He tried it at the gate 4 times. A pause. "Ma'am, he's out of the car. He's just standing there." Victoria looked out her window and down 4 floors, and there he was, a man in a golf jacket standing beside a German sedan in a parking space with his name painted on the curb, looking up at a building he had walked into every morning for 11 years. "Ray, is he alone?" "There's a lawyer in the passenger seat, ma'am." "Send them to the small conference room, not my floor. And Ray, I want you standing in the hallway the entire time." "Yes, ma'am." At 11:20. Preston Vaughn sat down across from her with an attorney beside him and put both hands flat on the table. "Before he says anything," Vaughn said, nodding at his lawyer, "I want to say something, and I want you to hear it as a man and not as a defendant. Preston, 11 years. His voice was steady, but there was something running underneath it. 3 regulation packages, 2 engine formula changes, a recession where your father cut 40% of this staff, and I kept a program alive on nothing. I did that. Nobody's saying you didn't work. No, you're saying I couldn't read a drawing." His jaw flexed. "Do you know what it is to inherit somebody else's genius?" To walk into a building where every man on that floor tells you a story about a kid who could hear a bearing go bad from across a shop. For 11 years, I have been compared to a ghost Victoria. So you deleted him. I did my job. You deleted him from a plaque, and then you deleted a damper you didn't understand, and then you deleted a driver's career to cover it. That is not. Preston. I'm going to ask you one question, and if you lie to me, I'll know, and it will be the last conversation we ever have that isn't through him. She pointed at the lawyer. 11 months ago, an application came in for a maintenance position from a man named Nathan Carter. Vaughn went still. Facilities hires don't come to the CTO, Victoria said. They don't go anywhere near you. There's no reason for your name to be on that file. But I pulled the approval log Sunday night, and there's an override on it, and the override is yours. The lawyer put a hand on Vaughn's arm. Preston, he said quietly. Vaughn ignored him. Yes, he said. Victoria felt the floor tilt. You knew. I knew the day the application came through. He was looking at the table. Same handwriting on the signature line. Same address in the county. Nathan Carter, no degree, 4 years at a truck fleet in Reno. And I sat in my office with that piece of paper for about an hour. And you hired him. I approved him into facilities. Vaughn's voice had dropped. You want to hear the worst of it? Say yes, because I'm going to say it either way. I could have blocked it. It would have taken 30 seconds. But I thought if he's on the payroll, I know where he is. I know what he's touching. He's in a jumpsuit pushing a broom on the far side of the building, and every morning I get to walk past him, and he doesn't say anything. And every morning I know I'm still standing, and he isn't. The room was completely silent. You kept him, Victoria said, so you could see him small. I kept him, Vaughn said, because I was afraid of him. Those are the same thing. I just didn't know it for 11 months. His attorney closed his eyes. Victoria stood up. She had to. Preston, I'm terminating you for cause as of this morning, she said. I'm reporting the fastener substitution to the sanctioning body and to the safety board by Friday. I'm reopening the proving ground incident. And I'm going to state in writing that the 2022 change order was executed under your signature without a validation test. You'll destroy this company. Then it deserved destroying. Victoria. He stood too, and his voice finally broke apart. I'm 55 years old. Do you understand what this makes me? I'll never work in this industry again. Never. Not consulting, not a supplier, not a community college. I will be the man who did this. That's the whole rest of my life. Victoria Hayes looked at him, and she found to her own surprise that she wasn't angry anymore. Preston, she said. Eli Reyes is 31, and he walks with a cane. Preston Vaughn had no answer for that. At 12:15, they walked him out through the lobby, because that was the protocol, and the protocol did not care that the whole day shift was coming up from the floor. Nobody threw anything. Nobody said anything. 40 people watched a man in a golf jacket carry a cardboard box past a display engine with his name on the plaque under it, and when the glass doors closed behind him, one of the young techs at the back said not loud, "That's for the mop guy." And Danny Brooks turned around and looked at him and said, "His name is Nathan." At 1:40. Tuesday afternoon. Victoria opened the cardboard portfolio from Preston Vaughn's credenza on the conference room table, with 2 lab technicians photographing every page as she lifted it. Original drawings. Vellum. Hand-inked. Program 0. 47 sheets, and on every one of them in the title block in the lower right corner in small block capitals, the same 3 letters. N. Calder. Under the drawings was a manila envelope, and inside the envelope was the intellectual property assignment. Ruth Yeager had described, signed in March of 2015, and clipped to it was a single page of company letterhead in a shaky, cramped, unlovely hand that Victoria had grown up reading on birthday cards. Her father's. She had to sit down before she could get through it. Nate, I'm not going to try to talk you out of it again. You've got a baby, and you've got a hole in your life, and I've been on the other side of that. And I know there's nothing in this building worth what you'd be trading. Go home. Be her father. But I'm not letting you sign away your name. Money fine. You never wanted any of it, and I'm going to have my people put some in an account anyway, and you can fight me about it in 10 years. But your name stays. I'm having the plaque cut for the lobby, and it's going to say what's true and when you're ready to come back. Whether that's next year or when that girl of yours is grown, there's a door here, and it's got your name on it too. You told me once every machine has a person behind it. I'm going to make sure this one does. Gordon. Victoria set the page down. Then she picked up the phone and called the front desk. Ray. Ma'am. The plaque in the lobby. Do we have a record of when it was installed? Ma'am, I've been here 11 years, and it went in about a year after I started. I remember because they did it on a Sunday. Do you remember who was there? Mr. Vaughn was there. He supervised it. Was my father there? A pause. No, ma'am, Ray said. Your father was in the hospital that month. That was the first time. Victoria Hayes sat alone in a conference room with 47 vellum drawings and a letter from a dead man, and understood finally and completely that her father had ordered a plaque with Nathan Calder's name on it and had gotten sick, and that in the 6 weeks he was gone, another man had walked into the fabrication shop with a revised text and had it cut in brass. At 3:30, she called Marcus Reyes. Where's your brother right now? Ma'am. Eli. Where is he? He does aquatic therapy Tuesdays. He'll be home by 5. Marcus, I need you to ask him if he'll see me tonight, and I need you to tell him that he does not have to, and I need you to tell him that whatever he says, nothing changes. The report is being retracted either way. That's not a bargaining chip, and I don't want him to think it is. There was a long silence on the phone. Ma'am, Marcus said, and his voice had gone thick. Can I say something out of line? Please. You could have buried this in about 4 different places, and I watched you not do it in all 4. At 6:50 that evening, Victoria Hayes sat in a small living room in the East End with a cup of tea. She didn't want to cross from a man with a cane leaning against the arm of his chair, and she said the words she had written out in the car, and then thrown away. Mr. Reyes, the incident report was wrong. You didn't miss a shift. The crankshaft failed because 6 fasteners in the bottom end were the wrong grade, and the change that put them there was executed without a validation test, and you reported the symptom 4 times before it happened, and you were told you over-report. Eli Reyes didn't move. Say the last part again, he said. You were right. He nodded slowly. He looked at the wall for a while. 4 years, he said. You know what the worst part was? It wasn't the back. It was that after a while I started to believe them. That's the part I can't. He stopped and started again. You hear something enough. 9 people in a room. My own team. And after about a year I started thinking, well, maybe I did. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I'm the guy who threw it away and made up a noise so I could live with it. Victoria's eyes were burning. There was a noise, she said. There was a noise. There was a stitch in it. You used the word stitch. Eli Reyes put his hand over his mouth and turned his face away, and Marcus stood up from the couch and went and stood behind his brother's chair with his hand on his shoulder, and nobody in that room said anything for a while. Finally, Eli wiped his face with the back of his wrist. Who found it? He said. Your brother pulled the fastener. No, ma'am. Who found it? Victoria put down the tea. His name is Nathan Calder, she said. He designed the original engine. He left in 2015 when his wife died. He came back 11 months ago under his wife's maiden name and pushed a broom in the building where his own drawings are locked in a basement, and on Wednesday night he broke into a clean room and fixed your engine for free, and I threw his badge across my lobby on Friday and told him he was a janitor with a wrench. Eli Reyes looked at her. Ma'am, he said, you should go find that man. He won't take my calls. Then don't call him. Wednesday, 5:58 p.m. Victoria Hayes parked a car that cost more than the building in front of a rented duplex on the east side and sat in it for 11 minutes before she got out. A 7-year-old opened the door. Hi, Emma said. Hi. Are you here for my dad? I am. Are you the lady from his work? Victoria's throat closed. Yes. Emma considered her with an expression that Victoria would think about for years. He's making pancakes, she said. It's Wednesday. He makes them whenever now. Nathan came to the door with a dish towel over his shoulder, and when he saw who it was, everything in his face shut like a door. "Emma, go set the table." "But—" "Go on." She went. She left it open 4 inches. Both of them knew. Nathan stepped out onto the step and pulled the door most of the way closed behind him. "Ms. Hayes." "6 fasteners," Victoria said, because she had decided in the car that she would lead with that and nothing else. "Number 4, number 2, and both ends of the 6 main. All light, all cut thread, all out of spec since the 2022 weight pass." Nathan absorbed it. "Clamp load," he said. "Yes." "You pulled them all. All of them, both banks and every serial we've built since 2022. We're recalling 41 cars." Nathan's eyebrows went up about a 1/4 inch. On him, that was a shout. "That's expensive." "It is. Halverson. Whitfield told me to find my noise." Victoria almost smiled. "He knew my father." Nathan leaned against the door frame and folded the dish towel over and over in his hands. "Preston. Terminated for cause. Tuesday morning. It's going to the safety board Friday, and I'm reopening the proving ground incident. Eli Reyes." I sat in his living room last night. Something moved through Nathan Carter. Then something that had been braced for 4 years and finally didn't have to be, and he had to look away down the street for a second. "He was 27, he said. "You knew about him." "I read the incident report in the recycling," Nathan said. "Month 2. I stood in a bay with a bin in my hands, and I read a report that said, 'Money shift,' and I knew standing there exactly what happened and exactly why, and I put it back in the bin." "Why?" "Because I was a facilities tech with no credentials and no history, and a name that wasn't mine, and if I opened my mouth, they'd have looked me up, and if they looked me up, I'd have lost the job." His voice was flat and terrible. "And if I lost the job, I lost the health plan, and Emma had a follow-up cardiology appointment in April because of something they heard when she was 4, and it turned out to be nothing. It turned out to be absolutely nothing." He looked at Victoria. "I let a man carry that for 4 years, so I could keep an insurance card in my wallet for a thing that turned out to be nothing." Victoria stood on the step of a rented duplex and understood that she had come here to apologize to a man who had spent 4 years unable to forgive himself. "Mr. Calder." "Don't. I'm going to say it anyway. I judged you by your uniform." Her voice was shaking now, and she let it shake. "I had a plaque in my lobby for 11 years, and I never once asked why the dates didn't work. I had a man on my floor for 11 months, and I never learned his name until security flagged a door. And on Friday, I stood in front of 40 people and told them what you were worth, and every single one of them knew better than me." Nathan didn't answer. "I want you back," Victoria said. "Not as a technician. Chief Engineering Director. Full authority over the technical program. Direct to me, no board layer. And the drawings go back in the archive under your name. No. Nathan. Ms. Hayes. I've got a warehouse job starting Monday, and it's days, and it's 4 miles from her school." He shook his head. "You want to fix something, fix the report on that kid and put the right name on that plaque, and you don't need me in the building to do either one." "That's not why I'm asking." "Then why?" Victoria took the folded letter out of her jacket. "Because my father wrote you a letter in 2015, and you never got it," she said. "Preston had it in a portfolio in a basement for 11 years. Nathan looked at the paper in her hand and did not take it. "Read it," he said quietly. "I can't, not standing here." So Victoria Hayes stood on a concrete step in the East End at 6:10 in the evening and read her dead father's handwriting out loud to the man he'd written it to. And when she got to the part about the door with his name on it, Nathan Carter put his hand over his eyes and stood there and shook. She stopped. "Keep going," he said. She read the last line. "You told me once every machine has a person behind it. I'm going to make sure this one does." Nathan didn't speak for a long time. Then, from 4 inches of open doorway behind him, a small voice said, "Daddy." "Yeah, baby." "Is that about Grandpa Gordon?" Victoria's head came up sharply. Nathan wiped his face with the dish towel and let out a broken laugh. "That's what she called him," he said. He came to the hospital when she was born. He came to the funeral. He drove out to the house twice that first year with groceries in the back seat that he pretended his wife made him bring. He looked at Victoria. I didn't tell you that because I didn't want you thinking I was owed something. You were, Victoria said. You are. Nathan looked down at his daughter, who had opened the door the rest of the way and was standing there in socks holding a paper trophy with a crooked base. One condition, he said. Name it. Nobody on that floor works off a copy again. Everybody, every junior, every senior comes through the original drawings and learns why every part is there before they're allowed to take one out. His voice hardened into something Victoria had not heard from him yet. Because 11 grams killed a man's career and almost killed a kid on the back straight at Sebring, and it happened because somebody looked at a drawing and saw a part instead of a reason. Done. And Ms. Hayes? Yes, I leave at 5:40 every day, Nathan said. Every day. There's no exception for a race weekend, there's no exception for a sponsor, there's no exception for you. Victoria Hayes put out her hand. 6:15 at St. Anne's, she said. You've never once been late. Nathan Carter looked at her hand for a second. Then he shook it. Thursday 7:02 a.m. Nathan Carter walked through the glass doors of Apex Velocity Racing carrying a lunch bag and a paper trophy with a crooked base, and Ray Delgado came out from behind the security desk so fast he knocked over a cup of pens. Mr. Carter. Ray. They told me yesterday. I didn't sleep. Ray had a new badge in his hand, and he held it out with both of them the way you'd hand somebody a plate. I made it myself. Usually HR does it. I said no, I'm doing that one. Nathan looked at the badge. It said Nathan Calder, Chief Engineering Director, and under it in the small line where facilities badges said, FAC it said, Access All. Ray, I don't need all. You built the building, sir. I built an engine. Same thing around here, Ray said, and then his chin went. He turned away and pretended to fix the pens. Nathan put a hand on his shoulder for about 2 seconds and then walked toward the floor, and behind him, Ray Delgado said, Sir, my granddaughter, the heart thing. She had the surgery in May, and she's fine, and you asked me about her every single week for 11 months, and nobody else in this building even knows I've got one. Nathan stopped. What's her name? Sophia. Bring me a picture tomorrow, Nathan said, and kept walking. At 7:14 he pushed through the door onto the shop floor, and the noise stopped. Not gradually, all at once. Somebody killed an impact gun mid-pull, and the compressor cycled down, and 42 people stood in a bay, looking at a man they had watched carry a mop past them for 11 months. Nobody knew what to do. Danny Brooks broke it. He came down the aisle wiping his hands, and he stopped 4 feet away and looked at the badge hanging on Nathan's chest. Calder, he said. Brooks, you lied to me for 11 months. I did. You let me buy you coffee. You bought me 9 coffees. 11. Danny's face was doing something complicated. I counted after Friday. 11 coffees and 1 Christmas ham, and I never once got a straight answer out of you about anything. Nathan looked at him. Danny, when you asked me where I learned it, I said from a guy who's dead. You did. That was true, Nathan said. The guy who taught me was Gordon Hayes. Danny Brooks stood there for a second. Then he laughed once, a wet, ugly bark of a laugh, and grabbed Nathan by the back of the neck and pulled him in and pounded him twice on the shoulder blade, and the whole floor lost it, and somebody started clapping, and then everybody was clapping. And a 23-year-old apprentice at the back put 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled hard enough to hurt. Nathan stood in the middle of it with his ears red and a paper trophy under his arm, and let it happen for about 10 seconds. Then he held up a hand, and it went quiet again. And that was the moment the floor understood. Something had actually changed, because the mop guy raised one hand, and 42 people shut up. I'm going to say 3 things, Nathan said. And then everybody goes back to work because we're 11 days behind. Somebody laughed. 1. I'm sorry I wasn't straight with you. I had reasons, and they were mine, and they weren't about any of you. 2. Nobody in this building calls me sir. You call me Nathan, or you call me Calder, and if either of those is hard for you, you can call me Hay. More laughing. 3. He let it settle. Starting Monday, nobody on this floor works off a copy. Not a scan, not a revision, not a PDF, somebody printed in 2019. Every assembly you touch, you're going to sit down first with the original print and somebody who can tell you why every part on it is there. That's not a lecture. That's not a training initiative. His voice dropped and hardened. 4 years ago, a man took 11 grams out of this engine because he saw a part and didn't see a reason, and a 27-year-old kid named Eli Reyes lost his career for it and almost lost his spine, and on Saturday, it was going to happen again with Kip Sandoval inside the car. Nobody moved. So no more copies, Nathan said. That's it. Go to work. At 9:30 that morning, 4 floors up, the board of Apex Velocity Racing convened an emergency session, and by 9:41, a director named Grant Carlisle had made a motion to remove Victoria Hayes as chief executive. I want it stated plainly, Carlisle said. In 5 days, this company has canceled a homologation withdrawn from the season opener, terminated its chief technical officer, and is now proposing a voluntary recall of 41 customer vehicles at an estimated cost of $19 million. Nobody has crashed. Nobody has complained. There is no regulatory action pending. This is entirely self-inflicted. There was a crash, Victoria said. 4 years ago with a signed settlement, with a false report, with a closed file. Carlisle spread his hands. Victoria, I knew your father. Gordon was a hard man, and he was a practical man, and he would never in his life have handed a plaintiff's bar 4 years of discovery for free. Victoria stood up. Grant, my father pulled a car out of a paid race in 2011 because he didn't like a wheel bearing. That's a story. It's in a notebook in his desk in his handwriting, and Bill Whitfield was in the room. She put both hands on the table. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you exactly what happens if we do it your way, and then you can vote. The room was silent. If we quietly respect the fastener and roll it into service parts and say nothing, then some Saturday in the next 3 years, a man in Scottsdale takes his car to a track day, and the bottom end lets go at 9,000 RPM on a straight. And he dies, or the man behind him dies. And in the discovery for that lawsuit, somebody finds an email from this week. She looked around the table. And the headline is not that our engine failed. The headline is that we knew. You don't know it would fail. I know 6 fasteners in the car we tested were 40% light. Carlisle's jaw tightened. There is no evidence any customer unit is affected. At 9:52, the conference room door opened, and Marcus Reyes came in without knocking, holding a phone, and he was so pale that 2 directors turned in their chairs. Ma'am, I'm sorry. You said any hour. Go. Scottsdale. Marcus's hand was shaking. The owner let our field tech pull the number 4 cap this morning, serial 009. They found a crack in the cap web, ma'am, visible. No dye, no magnaflux, you can see it with your eyes. The room made a sound. How many hours on that car? Victoria said. 6 track days. He's got a session booked at Willow Springs on Sunday. Nobody in that room said anything for a full 4 seconds. Then, Grant Carlisle sat back in his chair, and he was quiet for a long moment. And he was not a stupid man, and he had 2 grandsons. Withdraw the motion, he said, at 11:15 a.m. Friday. Apex Velocity Racing filed a voluntary safety notification with the sanctioning body and the National Safety Board, covering all 41 units built after March of 2022, and at 11:40, Victoria Hayes stood at a podium in her own lobby, 12 feet from a display engine with the wrong name on it, and read a statement she had written herself at 4 in the morning and had refused to let legal touch. 4 years ago, a development driver for this company was blamed in writing for a mechanical failure that was not his fault, she said. His name is Elias Reyes. He reported the symptom 4 times before the failure, and he was told he over-reported. He was wrong about nothing. We were wrong about everything. That report is being formally retracted today, and I have asked the sanctioning body to correct its record. A reporter in the 3rd row put his hand up, and she ignored him. The failure was caused by a change to our engine's bottom end that was made without a validation test. The same change is present in 41 customer cars. We are recalling all of them at our expense, and every car will be rebuilt to the original 2014 specification. Ms. Hayes. The reporter didn't wait. You've withdrawn from Sebring, you've lost a sponsorship installment, and you're spending $19 million on a defect nobody found. What do you say to your shareholders? Victoria looked at him. I say somebody found it, she said. He was pushing a broom on my shop floor and I fired him for it, and he was right and I was wrong, and that's the whole story. Everything else is arithmetic. She stepped away from the podium. That clip ran 11 million times in 9 days. At 2:20 that afternoon, Preston Vaughn's attorney sent a 4-page letter contesting the for-cause termination and invoking the indemnification clause. And at 2:35, Alan Pruitt walked into Victoria's office and put it on her desk and said, "It's going to be ugly and it's going to be long." It was neither. Because at 4:50, that same afternoon, a fastener supplier in Ohio, a small family company that had been quietly terrified for 3 days, produced a purchase order from March of 2022 for a cut-thread fastener at 40% of the previous unit cost. And the line for engineering approval was blank, and stapled behind it was an email from Preston Vaughn to their sales manager that said in full, "We don't need a validation waiver on a fastener, just ship it." Pruitt read it twice. "Well," he said, "that's the whole case in 19 words." The letter contesting the termination was withdrawn on Monday. There was no lawsuit. There was a Federal Safety Board interview in August that lasted 6 hours and a finding of record in November, and Preston Vaughn never worked in the industry again. He sent one thing 8 months later. Not to Victoria. A card in an envelope to a man in the east end of the city with 4 words in it and a signature. "You were the better engineer. P.V." Nathan read it standing at his kitchen counter, and Emma asked who it was from, and Nathan said an old coworker, and then he put it in the trash and went back to making eggs and never mentioned it to anybody as long as he lived. At 8:40 on a Tuesday in September, Ruth Yeager called Victoria Hayes at the office. "I've been sitting on something for 6 years, and I want it off me." Ms. Yeager: "Call me Ruth, honey. I'm 71. A chair creaked. "In April of 2015, 3 weeks after Nate Calder left, your father came into my office and shut the door, which he never did, and he had me set up a payroll instrument. He called it a deferred technical retainer. I said, 'Gordon, there's no such thing.' He said, 'There is now.'" Victoria went very still. "He funded it out of his own compensation," Ruth said. "Not company money, his, $14,000 a quarter for as long as he lived into an account with Nate's name on it. And there was a letter of instruction that said the account was not to be disclosed to the beneficiary during Gordon's lifetime, and that on his death, the trustee was to notify him." "He died 4 years ago." "Yes." "Ruth." "The trustee was Preston Vaughn," Ruth Yeager said. Victoria closed her eyes. "He never notified him. He never notified him." At 9:15, Victoria had Pruitt on the phone, and by Thursday, they had it in front of them. 16 years of quarterly deposits into a custodial account at a bank downtown, untouched, invested by default in an index instrument, because nobody had ever given it a different instruction, and it had sat there compounding through 2 market cycles while a man mopped floors 2 miles away and worried about a $400 dentist bill. The balance was $2,180,000 in change. Victoria took it to him herself. She found him in clean room 3 at 7 at night, with the top end of the second-generation Vanguard on a stand, and Marcus Reyes and 4 other engineers around it. And she said, "Nathan, I need 10 minutes." And he said, "Take 20, they've earned a break." And they went out into the corridor. He read the statement. He read it 3 times. Then he leaned back against the wall and slid down it until he was sitting on the floor of his own workshop in a director's shirt, and put the paper on his knees and didn't say anything for about a minute and a half. "He told me he was going to," he finally said. "In the letter. I heard you read it. I thought he was being kind." "He did it for 16 years, Nathan, out of his own pocket, even after you were gone, even after he got sick." "Why?" "Because he said you'd fight him about it in 10 years. Nathan laughed, and it broke apart halfway. "I'd have taken it," he said. "That's the part. Year 2, year 3 when she was little, and I was working a truck fleet in Reno, and I had $11 in a checking account. I'd have taken it in a second. I told myself I didn't want anything from that place, and that's a nice story, but the truth is, nobody offered. Somebody did. Yeah. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. Somebody did. Victoria crouched down in front of him. It's yours. There's no condition, and no announcement, and no press. Pruitt's already cleared it. Nathan looked at the number. Then he said, half. What? Half of it goes to Eli Reyes. Victoria sat back on her heels. Nathan, the company is already. The company's paying him a settlement because a lawyer negotiated it, Nathan said. That's not the same thing. That's arithmetic. This is a man handing another man money out of his own pocket because he owes him, and I owe him. He held up the paper. I read that report in a recycling bin in month 2 and I put it back. That's mine. That doesn't go away because you filed a retraction. He'll say no. Then tell him it's not from me, Nathan said. Tell him it's from Gordon. Eli Reyes said no anyway, twice, and then on the third try, he said yes. And in March, he opened a program at a community college 2 towns over, teaching vehicle dynamics and instrumentation to 19-year-olds who'd never sat in anything faster than their mother's minivan. And he told every incoming class the same thing on the first day. If you hear something in a machine and you can't prove it yet, you say it anyway. You say it out loud, you write it down, and you put your name on it. And if somebody with a bigger title tells you that you over-report, you say it again. At 6:00 a.m. on a Sunday in October, Ray Delgado led a fabrication crew into the lobby for the second time in his career. The old plaque came off in 11 minutes. The new one had been cut from the original 2015 fabrication order, the one Gordon Hayes had signed 6 weeks before he went into the hospital, pulled out of a supplier's archive by a woman in accounts payable who had been at Apex for 29 years and had cried when she found it. Vanguard Generation 1. Designed by Nathan Calder. Built by the men and women of this floor. Every machine has a person behind it. Nathan came in Monday morning at 7 and walked past it without stopping, and then stopped 11 feet later and came back. He stood there a long time. Danny Brooks came up beside him with 2 coffees. 12, Nathan said. What 12 coffees? Danny handed him one. Your name's on a wall, Calder. It's my dad's line, Nathan said. The concrete guy. Every driveway in the county. He took a drink. I said it to Gordon in a parking lot in 2013, and he wrote it down on the back of a fuel card receipt, and I thought he was making fun of me. He wasn't. No, Nathan said. He wasn't. 7 months later, at 11:40 on a Thursday morning in May, the second-generation Vanguard 512 fired for the first time on the dyno, and Nathan Calder did not push the button. Marcus Reyes did. Nathan stood at the back of the room with his arms folded and made a 26-year-old start his own engine, and when it settled into idle and cleaned up and pulled through 8,500 without a stitch or a tick or a whisper in it. Marcus turned around, looking for him, and Nathan was already looking at the ceiling with his eyes shut. Well, Marcus said, say it back to me. Say what back? What's it doing? Nathan said. Not the data. What's it doing? Marcus listened. It's happy, he said. Yeah. Nathan opened his eyes. That's the whole job, kid. Everything else is spreadsheets. They put it in a car in September. Sebring the second Saturday in November, 12 hours, and Apex Velocity Racing showed up with one entry. A new engine, a driver who had spent 11 months answering questions about a recall, and a technical director who had been a janitor 18 months earlier. Nobody picked them. At 9:04 a.m. on race morning, Kip Sandoval found Nathan behind the timing stand with a headset around his neck and a 7-year-old, now 8, sitting on a flight case eating a granola bar. Hey, Emma, right? I'm 8. That's very old. I know. Kip crouched down to Nathan's level. Can I ask you something before I get in? Ask. Is it good? Nathan looked at him. You want the sponsor answer or the real one? Real one. Kip, I've had my hands inside that engine 400 times, Nathan said. I know every fastener in it, and I know what grade it is, and I know who torqued it and when, because it's on a card with a signature. There is not one part in that car that anybody put there without knowing why it's there. He held the kid's eyes. "It's good. Go drive it." Kip Sandoval nodded, stood up, and then said, "Mr. Calder, if you tell me to bring it in, I'm bringing it in. I don't care what lap it is. I don't care what position. I'll hold you to that." At hour 9, he held him to it. 7:52 p.m. The car was leading by 41 seconds, with a clean stop cycle, and 3 hours to run, and Nathan Calder took off his headset and put it back on, and said one word on the channel. "Repeat." "Say again," Kip's voice. "Lift at the end of the back straight and let it coast to the braking zone. Don't touch anything else. We're leading, boss. Do it." He did it, and Nathan stood absolutely still with his eyes closed and both hands over the headset cups, and 11 people around him watched a man listen to a car through a radio microphone from 1.5 miles away. Then he said, "Bring it in." The pit wall detonated. "Nathan." The team manager was on him instantly. "That is a 40-second lead with 190 minutes left. If you bring it in for a look, we lose the lap." "Bring it in." "On what data?" "On the fact that it's making a noise on the overrun," Nathan said. "And there is nothing on that car that should make a noise when nothing's pushing on it." Victoria Hayes was standing 6 feet behind him. Everybody turned and looked at her, which is what people do, and she looked at Nathan's back for about 1 second. "Do what he says," she said. They brought it in at 7:58, and they had the rear deck off in 22 seconds, and it was not the engine. It was a drive shaft coupling with 3 of 6 bolts backed out of their safety wire, and the wire was intact, and the bolts had backed out anyway, and Danny Brooks looked at it and said one word that does not go on television. 40 minutes, Nathan said. "Maybe 35. Then it's on the track behind him at 180. They changed it in 9 minutes and 40 seconds and came back out in 4th. 2 laps down to nothing. 1 lap down to leader with 2 hours and 40 minutes to run. Emma Calder tugged her father's sleeve. "Daddy, did we lose? No, baby. We're in 4th. We're in 4th and everybody in this garage is going home," Nathan said. "That's not losing. That's just 4th. They got it back in 2 hours and 11 minutes. Not because anything heroic happened. Because the car never made another sound, and the second-place car had a brake issue at hour 11, and the leader came in for an unscheduled splash with 19 minutes to go, and Kip Sandoval, who had driven 6 of the last 9 hours and had lost a lap for a noise nobody else could hear, put it in front with 14 minutes left and held it there. When the car crossed the line, the timing stand came apart. Danny Brooks, 62 years old, 2 bad knees, jumped up on a tire cart. Marcus Reyes screamed into a headset that was still live and deafened 3 people. Ray Delgado, who had flown out on the team's dime for the first time in 11 years, hugged a woman from accounts payable who had found a fabrication order in an archive. Nathan Calder took off his headset, set it down on the counter, and turned around and picked up his daughter. Victoria Hayes stood in the middle of it with her hands over her mouth and tears cutting through 11 hours of Florida heat on her face, and she was not thinking about a trophy, or a sponsor, or a stock price. She was thinking about a man in a lobby picking his badge up off the floor. Later on the front straight with the car steaming and the crew climbing over it, and a photographer walking backward in front of them. Emma Calder stood beside her father, with her hand in his, and looked up at 11,000 people on their feet. "Daddy." "Yeah. Everybody's looking at you." "I know." She thought about it the way she thought about things with her whole face. "Are you important now?" And Nathan Calder crouched down on the hot asphalt in front of his daughter and put his hands on her shoulders and told her the truest thing he knew. "No, baby," he said. "I was always important. They just didn't know it yet." 3 weeks later, on a Monday morning in December, a 19-year-old apprentice named Todd Vasquez stood in a bay holding a wrench and a printout, and Danny Brooks took the printout out of his hand and tore it in half. "We don't work off copies. That's the current revision. Don't care. Then what do I work off?" Danny pointed at a long table by the wall, where 47 sheets of hand-inked vellum sat under glass in the middle of a working shop floor, in a room where men dropped tools, and swore exactly where Nathan Calder had insisted they be put. "You go read it," Danny said. "And when you don't understand why a part's there, You find somebody who does, and you ask, and nobody in this building is ever going to make you feel stupid for asking. That's the rule now. Who made that rule? Danny Brooks looked down the shop at a man in a director's shirt who was on his knees under a car with two juniors arguing about a bearing clearance and who would put his tools down at 5:40 on the dot, the way he did every single day, because a girl got out of school at 6:15 and he had never once been late. The guy who used to mop this floor, Danny said. Because the truest thing about greatness is that it almost never announces itself. It does not wear a suit, it does not stand at a podium, and it does not need its name on brass to keep doing the work. Sometimes it wears a mechanic's uniform and a pair of old boots, and it stays late for a stranger's son, and it goes home to make pancakes on the wrong day of the week. Nathan Calder never needed anyone to see him, but the day they finally did, they discovered he had been holding the whole thing up the entire time.